Howdy, welcome to the Short Term Rental Pro podcast, where we have conversations with those who are killing it in the game, who are making a living with short term rentals. I'm here with Bailey Kramer, probably the youngest person I've had on the show to this point, who was able to achieve financial freedom through co hosting. Co hosting, for those of you guys who don't know, is when you manage a property for someone else and just take a percent of revenue. Bailey, how young were you when you started doing co hosting?
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for having me on. When I started coasting, I was 20 or maybe 21, 20 or 21.
And how many properties do you co host today?
So I scaled my coasting business to 30 units. That was like my big, like straight just push for coasting. Right now, I've scaled back and we can talk about reasons and shifting and stuff. I'm at like 12 units right now coasting, and then I own two Airbnbs, just me.
Yeah, and Bailey, before we were talking, because we were catching up, Bailey and I are old pals. We probably talked. What was the first time we talked? Probably like 3 years ago at this
Yep.
point.
Yep.
And I saw just what he was doing, and he saw what I was doing. So we just connected and networked. But you have actually switched your focus today. You've used that, the co hosting, the cash flow and the income from co hosting, but B, the experience, the data. And you are leveraging that to now build your own ownership portfolio.
Yep, exactly. And even like when I first started out, like you mentioned for the first part about building an income stream from co-hosting, for me, that's how I ended up dropping out of college. Like that was
I
like the
should have
only
led with that.
what?
Bailey's a college dropout.
Woo! College dropout. Truthfully, like, that's the reason why I was able to drop out is because of the co-hosting side. Like you said, I'm switching focuses now. I'm still co-hosting. I'm still bringing on new units, but really the main focus now is okay. Now that I have steady income coming from the co-hosting side, great. I have enough, all this data, all this experience. Now I have a team that helps me run the properties. Now switching a little more to all right. Let's start building some wealth now.
Got it. And Bailey, what type of property? So I think Bailey's also someone he's obviously taken a multi-strategy approach, as has I. He's leveraged other people's properties to now buy his own properties. But what type of you're not even looking purely short-term rentals for your ownership portfolio. Tell us what type of properties are you looking for and why?
Yeah, for sure. So right now, I'm strictly focused on midterm rentals in the Midwest. These are properties that you say the price of them, people will laugh if they're from California, New York, or anywhere else where properties are more expensive. But places where the rents for a midterm rental are extremely high. Like for example, I bought a property back in October for 115,000, and it's actually a really nice 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom house. It's 1970, I want to say, so not crazy old. It's a really nice little house in a pretty solid area. And that one we just got signed from an insurance company for $2,800 per month. So $2,800 per month on a $115,000 property. And again, the tenants are in there for 3 plus months. So there's really little to no communication. Those are the types of properties that I'm going for right now until I hit probably ten to $20,000 per month of pure profit cash flow. And then I'll switch over to be like Jeremy and buy these big houses with pools and cool stuff.
It's funny how you say big houses because, like, I look at the houses I buy, and like I'm my buy box is really like a 500 grand house. That's pretty much it. If you average out, we bought the lowest I've bought was 400, and the highest is 750, but predominantly around 500. Whereas Bailey, right now, your buy box is what 150,
Not
150K.
even 115 is really what I'm going for, or even under, just so that I can match those up with the rents of $2,800 per month. Because there's
Yeah,
plenty of properties for 150,000 that I could buy. It's just that they're gonna bring in the same amount as a $115,000 property where I'm at, so it's like, I'm only gonna go for those lower ones right now.
sure. And then what is a mortgage on 100? Let's say, I don't know, what interest rates are you getting for 115 grand properties, and what does that monthly mortgage look like?
Yeah, so when I bought back in October, it was like I think the rates were, I could be wrong on this, so someone can fact check me, but I'm pretty sure they were like at the peak. Also, I want to mention this. I didn't have W-2 income for 2 years. I was like the least on paper for the banks to see. I was like the least qualified person to buy a house. Yes, I had some experience co-hosting, but like from the bank's eyes, I was nobody. I don't even think at the time my first tax return was just finishing up, so I don't even think I had any tax return. So I was like the worst of the worst on paper, but I bought it to 115,000. I had to put I think 30% down, and my interest rate was 8.6%, I wanna say. It was high, 8 and a half or something like that, but the monthly payment's only $750, somewhere around there. So, yes, the interest rate's stupid high. Yes, I had to put down way too much money, but I'm cash flowing $1,500 per month from this property. So it's like a crazy cash on cash return. But most importantly, like that deal is not going to make me $1 million, but it got me in the door for me, got money flowing. And now it's just a matter of duplicating it over and over again. And then now using different strategies now that I have the tax returns and I look better financially to the banks.
Yeah, and you put 30K down, so you have 30 grand of equity in the
Yeah.
property.
Yep.
So, are you trying to stack? Is it all in one geographic area, or is it just generally in the Midwest, like certain states? Or are you really trying to, what I call is like the fortressing strategy, where you just get a bunch in the same area? How are you looking to expand this medium term 100K property strategy that you're doing a really good job of?
Yeah, so there's really I'm like right now I'm just focusing in Indiana. And I don't live in Indiana. I've only been to Indiana one time. And the one time I've been there, I was driving through and got a $500 speeding ticket. So that's the only time I've
You're
actually
trying to
been
get
through.
out. You're
I'm
trying to
now
get
in
like
and
I'm here
out.
too long.
So the way that I actually found the market that I just bought my most recent property in, which is like the second one that I own just myself, is I co-hosted for somebody who has 3 properties in that market. And literally before we hopped
So
on
the
this
data, you
podcast,
had the data
I
from
had the
so
data literally before we hopped on this podcast. I'm texting with someone who found me on Furnish Finder to negotiate a 5-month lease for I'm throwing out $2,800. She's like 2,500. So we'll see where that one ends up. But I just saw the proof. I'm like, we're literally always booked. So I'm like, it's time for me to get one here. So to answer your question though, I'm really focusing in Indiana. And then there's really 5-ish markets that meet my buying criteria in Indiana. My buying criteria is really just number 1, I'll tell you how I found this market, the first one that I bought in that I'm not co-hosting in. I basically went to cities in Indiana by population. So I sorted by population. I prefer to buy in like larger cities or the biggest city possible, just because if I buy in like a 5,000 person town, like that's just sketchy if you ask me, but depending on the property and the strategy and stuff. But I was like, "All right, I want the biggest property possible, but I want properties values to be like I wanna be able to buy solid properties for 100 and $115,000. I also want these markets to not be, like, declining. I want them to at least be staying the same or ideally, of course, going up.
in terms of
Um
population.
in terms of population, exactly. So those are like the main things I looked at. So I literally went down the list. First city was Indianapolis. It was like the biggest city in Indiana. And I was like, nope, none of these properties are working. And you actually probably could find properties. Indianapolis is just so big. So I was like, this is too much for me. So I kept on going down the list and found basically like 4 or 5 cities in a row on this list. Terre Haute, Indiana, Kokomo, Indiana, Anderson, Muncie. Those are really the main 4 that I'm looking at right now. And they all just check the boxes of they have reasonable property prices. Like they don't have a lot of Airbnbs. Maybe after I say this, now everyone's going to flood the market. And just like the demand is there. So that's how I narrow that down.
And they might not be there for a 500K house or like a vacation
No, definitely
experience,
not.
but for the midterm, 2, 3 months at a time, people who are like, I don't want to live here, but I've got a project that a construction, I'm sure, are you getting, is it nurses? Is it construction workers?
Yeah. I'd say the past 2 people we've had that have been, like, in my mind, home run deals is we had a construction worker or 2 construction workers there for 3 to 4 months, paying $2,650 a month. That was, like, awesome. And then most recently, we have an insurance company who put in people for 3 months with the option to extend if their house isn't ready, which it probably won't be ready, but they're at $2,800 a month. So that was, like, awesome. We've had traveling nurses, and the one that I just told you about who's texting me now, she's a traveling nurse. I loved the idea of traveling nurses is awesome. The only problem is if you have a 3-bedroom house and it's, like, just a travel nurse and maybe their partner, they're usually not looking to spend the amount of money I'm looking for. So we've honestly just done really well at traveling construction workers. That's
Yeah.
probably been, like, our biggest one out of them all, or people relocating, said, "Hey, I'm buying a house. I just need a place for a month or 2."
Yeah, and that's honestly what I do, a hybrid strategy. So
Yeah.
I put it up for medium and short term rentals. A lot of times in the winter is when there's calendars available for a month or 2 at a time. So we just naturally get Like the medium, and this like I feel like someone should draw a diagram and show like medium term demand versus short term demand. Where short term you follow a bell curve. Summer, and I'm sure even the markets you're in, if you switch to short term for June, July, August, like you could make more money. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know why people go to Indiana. I would assume so, that there's just more travel. But then in the off season, it's pretty much the same medium term demand, like no matter what time of the year it is. Like you're just pretty much as likely to get a January renter as are an August renter. Am I correct with that assumption?
Yeah, I would say because the property that we have that I told you we had the construction workers and the insurance company in, before we had them, so, like, probably for the past, like, 3 to 6 months, we were doing it where we would rent it for a couple days at a time, a week at a time, and we made a little bit less than I'd say we made $2,400 a month roughly, and it was way more work. So, yeah, we're gonna get Thanksgiving filled, we're gonna get Christmas, we're gonna get New Year's, but you can do that anywhere. It just and, like, these properties are both near colleges, so, like, it's easy to get graduation filled, but besides that, you might get a weekend here and there, but it doesn't add up to the same amount of money as just, like, a really solid paying monthly rental. So, y I'd say compared to the work in these markets, it's like midterm rentals a no-brainer. If you do a short-term rental, I don't know. We've tried it, and it just doesn't work as well.
Got it. And I want to take this back. So I think Bailey, as you can see, he's very much prioritizing the amount of work he needs to do on a property, and that's a variable. Also, given, and I want to take this back to how you started your co-hosting and how you built that, because now you're focused on buying. So it's like, all right, it's the same amount of work to co-host a property as it is to own. I'm assuming that's where you're at, where it's the same amount of work to own a property as it is to manage it. I'd rather own them if I can. But to go back to the beginning, tell us, why did you start co-hosting? Seems like it was for you a way to get you out of having to get a job after college. It was a way for you to drop out of college, which you did do. So, yeah, why did you want to build this co-hosting portfolio, and how did you build it?
Yeah, for sure. So back to, like, sophomore year of high school, it was freshman semester, and I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. So that was my introduction to real estate. Before that, even, like, going in freshman year, I had no idea what I wanted to do. All I knew is I didn't wanna get a 9 to 5 job, like, that was just, like, my thing. Anytime someone would ask me, like, "Oh, what do you wanna do after college?" I'm like, "I wanna start my own business." They're like, "Yeah, yeah, that's cool. What do you wanna do after college?" I'm like, "Start my own freaking business," but I had no idea what I actually wanted to do, and I never was exposed to real estate as a kid.
Nobody at University of Central Florida seemed to be that supportive of you and your.
UCF. That's the place. But yeah, I never had, like, real estate experience, like, my family didn't do anything growing up, but sophomore year, just searching the Google machine, found Rich Dad Poor Dad for, like, best personal finance books, and started reading that, and I was like, "Oh my god, this real estate thing is, like, the most genius idea ever, oh my god." That led me to bigger pockets, that led me to just, like, networking my butt off with as many people as I possibly could, and joining different groups, Facebook groups, like paid groups to be in where I can surround myself with people who are just doing it. And then ultimately, the short story, after a year of reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, I bought my very first fix house, which is a fix and flip. And the way that I did that was I partnered with somebody and a couple people in this mastermind group that I ended up joining. So I was like, sweet, like fix and flip, that sounds awesome. So we did the fix and flip. It was not my thing, but it was cool. We made some money from it. Then we found another property to fix and flip, or it was like a wholesale. So I'm like, great, let's do that was awesome. Then I bought two long-term rentals with again these partners that I'm talking about. And I was like, "Cool, like, what's next?" It was just I didn't really have a vision of where I was going. I was just like,
You were
"If I
excited.
get hands on some real estate and make some money, like, this is sweet." So
Yeah.
that
What I remember from Bailey when I was talking to him initially, and for those listening who might be younger, you might be in school, you might not have money, but you might have time. Bailey at that time had time, and he would reach out to folk and pretty much be like, "Hey, I'd love to help you out or provide value for you." And by doing so, they in turn put him in front of the right people.
for sure. That was the biggest thing, like, I didn't like, all these deals I'm talking about, like, I didn't use my money, I didn't have good credit, I didn't have really anything but these other people who did have those things. I also didn't have experience. So it was really just like me getting in front of the right people. And that took a lot of time to do, but I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for the people that have helped me get here for sure. That was that. I was just doing a lot of things, but not really a clear path. And then my junior year ended and I had 2 long-term rentals that were making, like, a couple $100 a month, like, it wasn't because I was splitting it too with 2 or 3 other people, it wasn't a ton of money, and then I had 2 Airbnbs that were, like that launched around, like, July of 2021? Yeah, July 2021, and these were, like, humongous lake houses, this is, like, a really cool experience, and I was, like, the self-proclaimed manager on the properties because everyone else was, like, in their, like, 40s and didn't understand, like, technology and how to run the business, and honestly, I didn't either, but again, I had time on my hands, so I was like, "I'll do it," and then I was getting a management fee from it too. So, that was cool, and then basically what happened is I was just like, "Alright, like, I'm on the hunt for the next deal, let's just keep on doing this over and over again," and then someone actually came to me and was on Instagram and said, "Hey, I have someone who just bought a property and they need a co-host. Do you wanna do it?" And I was like, "Sure." Like, I didn't even know co-hosting was, like, a thing at this point, but I was like, "Sure, like, I can do that." So I ended up co-hosting this property, and that very first month, I made, like, 900 something bucks. And I was like, 900 I didn't put in any of my own money. Like, the turnaround time was super fast. I didn't have to deal with all these different partners. It was just, like, this one owner. I was like, "Wow, if I can just get 5 more of these, I could see this happening a lot faster than me buying 5 more and, like, having to deal with a bunch of other variables." So that was kinda like the spark for me where I was like, "Geez, if I can just get a couple more of these things, I just don't that is not my end goal by any means, but I'll be out of the I don't have to get that 9 to 5 job because if I can make 5,000 bucks a month minimum, that'd be cool."
I think that's similar to how I was back in probably about when we were talked first.
Yep,
But I still do co-host to this day. I co-host 5 properties. And initially, it was really like, yeah, this is if a place is making $5,000 a month on average. That's $1,000
yep.
per property. You don't have to put any cash in the game. And for me, it was definitely, and it seems like for you, the starting point, getting experience, getting properties. It also does help to have scale so you can hire more team members, have more local. They're going to want to come to your property and take care of things quickly when you have more volume in an area. So there's benefits of scale, but then ultimately cash. Co-hosting doesn't require you putting in any cash, and you take out. There are, in my opinion, and maybe I'll get your opinion on this. Ultimately, it is someone else's property, and sometimes maybe there's too many chefs in the kitchen. I don't know if that's something you've experienced, but that's
Definitely.
that's business as a whole. That's just like having clients. Technically, they're your clients. But yeah, what I want to ask is, how are you able to, like, someone listening who wants to follow in your footsteps, start a co-hosting business? Obviously, you were posting on social media, and that seems like how you got your first one, was you just put yourself out there. But let's say someone hasn't started doing that. What are tangible ways to get co-host clients?
Yeah, for sure. So, I break it down 3 things you have to check off in order to successfully land a co-hosting client. Someone needs to know you, someone needs to like you, and someone needs to trust you. The like and trust thing, that's something that I can't necessarily teach, like, how to get someone you just gotta be, like, a likable you gotta be
You gotta have a nice
there's
smile.
ways
You gotta
there's ways,
smile.
but exactly. Smile, be friendly, like, just be a nice person, that's a trust factor. The no factor is, like, the biggest thing that people have trouble with, is how do I get people to know me and know what I do, and how do I get to know people who actually need my service? So
So
it's
would that be outreach strategy? Obviously, I think you did inbound on social media.
Yeah. So, like, literally, there's and I'll name some, but there's, like, a million ways that you can possibly get people to know you and vice versa. What I see start with the mistakes I see people do first is people are when they're first starting out co-hosting or any business, but co-hosting specifically, is they're, like, too embarrassed or too afraid to tell everyone what they're doing. So the biggest mistake I see people do is, "Oh, I'll just get, like, a subscription on co-host marketplace, and I'll just, like,
They'll
magically
just
land
come my
clients," or
way. Yeah.
yeah, or, like, I'll just make a listing on Upwork, and I'll just magically get clients. I'm not saying you can't get any from those platforms, but if you're looking to actually start and you wanna do it, like, successfully, you have to be, like, putting out and, like, putting in effort. So, for example, one strategy that has been successful is calling long-term rental landlords and asking them, "Hey, saw your property listed for rent. Have you thought about turning this into a short-term rental?" If you call one long-term rental landlord, I almost guarantee you they're gonna either hang up on you or tell you no. If you call 10,
Yeah.
they're gonna probably hang up on you or tell you no. Everything is a volume game.
I would say that's the same that is the same because a lot of folk arbitrage is very popular, and
Yeah.
that is the same approach is just calling. You see an apartment for sale or you see an apartment for rent, you see a home for rent, their phone number is listed. You
Yeah.
give them a call. Chances are the first one I ever called I've actually never done outreach for co-hosting. For whatever reason, I've done outreach for arbitrage, but for me, co-hosting is I mostly do it on a lake where I already have properties and I have a boat rental business.
Yep.
So it's just like word of mouth. How it gets to me, for better or worse, probably should be a little bit more. I actually reached out to one property just because I saw it and I was like, "This is such a dope house." I was like, I just gotta talk to them and see what's up." I digress though, but either way, arbitrage co-hosting, you got to be comfortable just base level putting a phone to your ear and having conversations with people. The first call I ever did, I remember calling a guy in Wilmington, North Carolina. I saw his house and I brought it up and I was like, I was so timid. And he just said, "Oh, I'm not interested in that." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I hung up and I was like, "All right, that wasn't that bad."
Yeah.
Whatever.
For sure. And for people that are, like, super scared, test it out in some random market. Just start calling people. Just start getting rejected
Just
because
get comfortable.
yeah. And then the first one is always the hardest one to get. It's like there's no way around it. It's the hardest one to get. But then after you get that first one, referrals start to kick in way more because usually if someone owns an Airbnb, they typically know someone else who owns an Airbnb or them themselves are looking to buy another Airbnb. So the opportunities are endless once you get that first one going, but it takes time. That's what people always, like, I think miss out on is they think that, "Oh, they're just gonna get a property in a day, and if they don't get people to answer them, then they're gonna give up." You gotta stay with it. Also, like, meetup groups, that's somewhere that I gain coaching clients from. Going to real estate events, like real estate meetup groups, prefer in person. Nowadays, it's just, like, easier to connect with someone if you're in person at a meetup. But those are awesome ways to just build relationships, get people to know you. You have people. It's all about relationships, honestly.
Yeah, and actually, that's funny because Bailey and I. So Bailey, I'm from North Carolina. I spent a lot of time in New York City. My girlfriend lives here, but I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Bailey lives in Durham, which is right next to Chapel Hill,
Yep,
and he's networked the local real estate investor group, or one of them is actually by my friends started that.
yep,
So I went to two of the meetups there, and the second one, I actually talked to someone who ended up calling me and offering me to co-host his property, which is funny because I didn't even come there with that intention. I just friends, but that's just what happened. And we didn't even talk about his property at the meetup. He just afterwards hit me up. He said, "Hey, by the way, I know you do this. Would you be interested?" And then I actually didn't do it. It was just it's property where to me the juice is not worth the squeeze
yep,
type property. Like it's really far out there and in pretty rural area. And but someone else who goes to the meetups, Avery,
yep,
Avery texted me yesterday that he's doing the co-hosting for
yep.
that property. So I just think it's funny. Yeah, and he probably talked to him the same thing at the meetup too. So the meetups are real, guys. Like wherever you live, there's probably meetup. In New York City, we do about once a month, we do short-term rental meetups, not as much as but there's real I would just go to a real estate meetup and you find one landlord. And this is something I say, for arbitrage, but it's the same for co-hosting too. You can find like one landlord, one investor. They don't need 1,000 unit portfolio. Let's say they have 20 properties and they either rent 4 to you or 5 to you, or they let you manage 4 or 5 on a co-hosting basis. Bang, you could be set. Like,
Yeah,
you could quit your job right there. That's even if it's $800 a month times 4 or 5 times 5, that's 4 grand, So you really just need one person, and it doesn't again, it could be like a medium, like, guys, there's a lot of landlords out there with 10, 20 properties.
plenty.
There's a lot of them. Like, you would be surprised with how many of them there are. And I'm assuming that's how you found scale is through a couple when you said you got to 30, I'm assuming it wasn't 30 different. If it was 30 different owners, that'd be very strenuous. But yeah, was there one or two like really bigger fish
Yeah,
that were your clients?
100%. Yeah, one big fish in particular, and then a couple owners who had a couple properties. But yeah, one big fish who, like, I was able to the operation side is, like, for an owner, this is the other thing that people don't understand, like, the operation side, it's a lot. Like, to someone's property, of course, there's a way to automate it, but for someone like an investor who's strictly focused on buying properties, for them to learn the operation side, like, is so much work. So for this one owner in particular, I was able to take the complete all the operations completely off of his hand. That way he was able to strictly just buy properties. And that's really how, like, one of the ways I was able to grow so fast is by basically partnering with someone like that, an investor who was just like, he's looking to buy, I'm looking to operate. And by me doing that, he was able to scale a lot faster and I was able to scale a lot faster.
So how many properties did you grow to with this one owner?
I wanna say, like, properties, like, 8 8 or 9, but one of the units was a mini motel, so
Boutique hotel. Yeah, I
it was,
remember
like,
that
7 or
one.
8 units, so if you just go unit based, it was, like, 15 units, but it was, like, it was, like, 8 or 9 properties, I wanna say.
Wow. Okay. So at a time that, about half your portfolio was one owner,
Yep,
which some could say, all right, then you're a little bit too concentrated with one
definitely.
guy.
Yeah,
I'm assuming maybe that's why you went from 30 to 15 was
yep.
probably that one owner.
Yeah,
I
that
guess
for sure a bulk of
we don't
it.
need to get too into, you don't have to the whole tea, but I mean, is there like a high level of sometimes things don't work out with co-host clients?
Yeah, high level, I would say number 1, too many eggs in one basket, like, that's for sure a thing you want to avoid, and that's even what I tell people now, "Okay, like, great, it's awesome that you're working with this one person, but you gotta branch out on your own." That's also part of the reason why I'm strictly buying by myself right now, and I'm not taking on partners, is because for, like, my first 10, 15 $1,000, I want that just to be for me. I don't wanna, like, talk to anybody about it. I wanna wake up and not have to say a word and just make that money for me. And then, yeah, so with those 15 properties, high level, I would say high level, there was I'd say there's a falling out, I guess is the easiest way to say it,
Hey,
of
this pod is about the tea, guys. You're here
yeah.
for the tea, for the
Well,
juice.
it's like the story itself is so many hours worth, so I'm just trying to condense it into a sentence. I would say the trust wasn't there between us and
Mm,
really me not trusting him, not agreeing with some decisions he was making. I would say that's like the most PG way to say it is I wasn't agreeing with some decisions he was making that could have jeopardized me and, like, my control of actually operating these units. So instead of me waiting for him to fall off the rails and then me go down with him, I guess you can say, I said, "Listen, I gotta get off this train. I don't like where it's going. See you later," kind of thing.
I'm sure, that you were on the train for a few years,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that train provided you flexibility and avenues onto the train that you're on today.
Oh my god, yeah.
You had 2 trains go next to each other, you hopped onto the next train.
For sure. Yeah, that train opened my eyes to, like, a bajillion different things, both, like, tons of good things, tons of bad things, but at the end of the day, like, everything that I'm doing now, or a lot of it is, like, learning experiences from what I've done in the past, so I don't regret anything, and there's nothing bad from it, it's just all, like, good learning going forward.
Got it, okay. So you co-host how many and you own how many at this point?
12 co-host, 2 own.
And then for the 12 you co-host, do you charge the same management or co-host fee across the board?
I guess technically, no. I usually shoot for 20%. That's, like, the base, and then there's one owner in particular that has 3 now, and they're gonna continue to they actually turned their long-term rentals into short-term rentals. That
Mhm.
was one of those. So I'm doing 15% for them. Those are, like, midterm rentals, and then there's another midterm I'm doing at 18, and then the rest of the short term are all at 20.
Got it, okay. And then how many do you own yourself now?
2.
So you're at 15 listings.
Yep, roughly.
Is there a transaction volume across the 15?
That's a good question. Honestly, I don't know, and I think, like, seasonality is definitely a huge thing. Like, I have a property right now that's doing it's June and July already booked out. It's doing 20 to $25,000 per month for those 2 months.
Yep,
So
house
but in the
moving.
summer but in the
I know the lake houses.
yeah, yeah, the lake houses are phenomenal, but in the wintertime, they're doing, like, I don't know, maybe 5,000 if I had to throw off a number on top
Do
of my
they got a
head.
hot tub?
No, but we have a pool.
Oh, I heat it in the winter, that doesn't do too much.
No, it doesn't do it. It doesn't do
Yeah.
anything in the winter. Yeah.
Yeah, those lake
So
houses starting to add. We've just gotten so much, and this is probably my fault of posting and people just stalking my portfolio, but the inventory of lake houses, and also I think it's just natural too, things like this. I'm sure on the lake that you manage property, there's more Airbnbs now than
oh,
there
yeah.
was a couple years ago, but we're definitely trying adding hot tubs and stuff. And to be frank, if anyone's listening and is looking at that lake, numbers don't work. Stop. Everyone's got to stop trying. Like literally had one investor call me like 2 years, like a year or two ago, and he was like, he's buying this house, and he's always, he got this deal, and he just wanted my thoughts on it. And I was like, I mean, I don't know, like, but he bought it anyways, and then he calls me back this year. It's doing like 45 grand for a $500,000 lake house. I'm like,
It's
yeah, that's
terrible.
not. Yeah, I'm like, there's things you could do, but he's like, all right, how much could you do if you managed it? I'm like, I'm not trying to tell you like what I would do to the property because
Yeah.
then and whatever. It was all a good conversation. But my point being is, yeah, I guess things we're saying right now take with a grain of salt as to specific areas. And I always recommend people like, I think there's a huge, I don't want to say problem, but there's just a lot of times folk who are trying to get in, whether they're trying to arbitrage, whether they're trying to buy, they're just like, what type of area? What area? Literally, I'm sure you get it. You get it where it's like, what city is the best city?
Yeah.
What area? And then if that's your way of thinking, in my opinion, you're destined for failure. Really, it's what is like Bailey has a strategy. He is finding the right type of property for the clients that he is looking for in not even a specific market, but several markets that have the same characteristics.
Yeah.
That Bailey's thinking about it like he's not just saying, "Oh, I'm buying in this town, and if I just buy something in this town, automatically we're good to go." He's saying, I want a medium term rental. I don't for these properties that are going to cash flow $1,500 a month. I don't want to have as much turnover and more to deal with. Whereas the lake houses cash flow. I mean, if they're making 25 grand a month, what's their mortgage on that?
They bought it for 650. So I don't even know.
They're cash flowing a lot more, but that obviously it's a
Yeah.
much bigger house. But for that house, it warrants doing a purely short term
Oh, for
strategy.
sure.
There's probably not a market for the medium term, but just being thoughtful of what is the type of property you're looking for, what's your buy box, what is the clients that are coming to your property, and then how do you reach them?
Yeah.
And then obviously breaking down the numbers. Bailey knew off the top of his head that he could rent these out for $2,800 a month, and his mortgage payment is like 750, 800. That's really back of the napkin math. You guys can go to BNBCalc if you want to do more than back of the napkin math and actually want to break it down into all the individual characteristics. But really, it's you could also just do napkin math for something like that. So
For sure.
he's taking a step. Yeah, and I want to break this to what are some tangible tips that you have for folk listening? One, and also I'm curious, actually, scratch that question. Someone asked me the other day. So for co-hosting, if you're like trying to start, people I work with, they want to add the co-host strategy, and sometimes they're in places where they want to do a new market. I recommend like doing a Google My Business in whatever market they're trying to tackle. Is that something you recommend?
Yes. I want to throw one thing to the thing you said before because it's super important and then I'll answer the Google My Business thing. But yeah, like knowing like the exact market, the exact person you're targeting, all that stuff's super important. And then also the first thing is what's your end goal for the property? Because like I said, there's a reason why I'm not buying lake houses right now, or I'm not buying like vacation style houses. And it's strictly because my personal goal is to get consistent monthly cash flow with properties I can take down strictly by myself. So don't think, oh, you have to go. What's the best market right now for vacation rentals, like near lakes? What is that going to do for you? For me in a year, that's going to do a lot because that's probably going to be more of my focus as far as a lot of tax benefits, a lot of just like more scaling with it. So there's not like necessarily a right or wrong, but you have to know why you're doing it, or else it's what's the point of you finding a lake house? What if it strictly just makes you a couple $100 per month cash flow, but your goal is appreciation after 5 years? I don't know. So it's just important to know like why you're doing it. And then going back to your question of people who are looking to get into the coasting game, like Google My Business is definitely one solid thing I would say. It's like a super easy thing to do to set up. Takes 15 minutes, not even. So if you are looking to start a coasting business, I would say, yeah, set up Google My Business. Like it definitely does not hurt. I don't think it's going to be a magnet where you're going to get calls left and right the second you post it, but it's one of those things where you make it and it's a longer term play where you're going to continue to build on it for sure.
You're gonna get reviews, and then also do you put a website up that's attached to the Google My Business?
Yep. Yep. You can do that as well for sure.
So you have a website, you have an outreach strategy. So you're reaching out to people who are renting their properties long term.
Yep.
I think I remember you saying that like you can look for like Trulia furnished rentals is one of the good approaches because someone's much more likely to be willing to if they don't have to actually furnish it and they can just post it.
Yep.
That's a lot easier than having to set up. When you do set up a property for someone, so let's say you reach out to someone who has a long-term rental, they're looking to convert it to short. You project manage the conversion. What would you call that? A setup that you would charge them?
Exactly, a setup fee. And go back to the Trulia thing you said, like the most recent coasting client I got, it was a referral because I wasn't necessarily looking in this market. It was Cary, North Carolina, the one I texted you about.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of owners just like the one that I just am working with now, where she had it listed on Zillow. She had it listed on every site you could possibly think of, but for way too cheap. Like she was doing like 500 bucks, way like 500 bucks less per month than she should have. She probably could even get even more than that. So you can even call it $1,000 per month less than she should have. And hers was already furnished, ready to go. So it's just a matter of saying, hey, I noticed that you
Did
have
you
a
reach
property
out
for
did you reach out to her?
I didn't because I was gonna this one was a referral to me, so I didn't have to go through this process because I wasn't looking in this area. But if I were to be looking in Cary, North Carolina, or any other market,
Who referred you?
someone from social media.
Do you pay for referrals?
Yes, I paid her $500 referral fee.
Got it, and that's also one thing you could do is pay for referrals. Call a realtor,
Oh,
talk
yeah.
to realtors, talk to I guess I'll ask you, who else are good referral partners?
Yeah, realtors are awesome. What I always say is start with, like, your inner network. So that could be, like, friends and family, even if they don't have Airbnbs or they're not real estate people themselves, they always know people who are interested in real estate. So, I would just say to start, you've gotta tell your friends and family about it. I've seen also too, like, sometimes people are too afraid or embarrassed. What are my friends or family gonna say? You just have to do it. There's no other way around it. Like, my parents and friends and family weren't thrilled that I dropped out of college. I went for it anyways. Like, you just have to start talking, "Hey, I'm looking to get into this arbitrage thing, this co-hosting thing, this Airbnb thing." Start the conversation, and then, yeah, for actual, like, professionals, realtors are great. Airbnb cleaners, that's another really awesome one where you can literally find people who clean Airbnbs, get in touch with them, and then say, "Hey, do you have any clients that might need some help?" That's an awesome way. And especially when you have properties, it makes that conversation even easier. But again,
Because then they're cleaning yours,
mm,
and you can say, "Oh, tell me about the other people you're cleaning for."
exactly. But again, even starting out, you can still like the strategies don't necessarily change. It's just you're gonna have to do more volume because you don't have any proof or any track record. So it is what it is. That's really any business.
Yeah, so it's really at the beginning, it's being pretty relentless. A, letting your network know what you're doing, not feeling, "Hey guys, this is what could be a Facebook post or wherever
Yeah.
your network is. I'm doing this. Like I'm becoming a or I'm a co-host. I'm working if you're part of a mastermind, like you can say you're part of a mastermind and you just want to let everybody know and see if anybody has any, hey, and I'm paying for referrals. I'm paying $500 per property referral.
Yeah.
To be frank, like I've had people come to me and, if I knew I could get 500 bucks to make this intro, I would probably a lot of people would probably do that.
Yep.
So really your tangible tips, referrals is a good one. If someone's looking to get a co-host client, offer to pay for referrals.
Yep.
Also, put yourself out there, let people
Yep.
know what you're doing. Don't be afraid to call. Don't you see a long-term rental on there? Don't be afraid to while and dial, build relationships. Something I usually offer as advice is if you can meet up with somebody, meet up with them. Bailey, seems like you've been more remote for the most
I'm a
part. So
remote guy. I think in person, I think if you're brand new, I think that can maybe even help you a little bit more. Personally speaking, I wouldn't meet up with right this second where I'm at. Depending on the property size, like I know you have like that mansion on that lake that you co-host with the units that are going up. Like I'd meet that guy in person, but I wouldn't meet just like anybody in person right now. But if you're just starting out, you have to do what it takes. If that's what it takes, by
well,
all
that's what I did early on during COVID, and I don't do it at any really
yeah,
anymore. I can't even remember the last time maybe I'll meet up at the property to look at it, but I'm not gonna. But early on, would meet up and get a beer, just grab a beer, even if there wasn't a specific property that we were even gonna talk about. I just knew they owned 5, and I also just knew that my lights just went out for whatever reason
right.
on YouTube. If you guys saw it, Spotify, just ignore me. But yeah, just meet up, feel comfortable putting yourself out. What other and then I guess we've talked so much today about putting yourself in front of people, getting clients, and then
Yep.
obviously also it's been awesome to watch you and see how your trajectory and how co-hosting is really the start for you, and it'll be interesting to see what you're doing in 10 years. And for me, again, co-hosting was pretty much the first strategy that I used, and I still use it today, but really multi-strategy approach as your career evolves as your situation changes, you can morph. The thing that's cool about short term rentals is you can morph it into what you want it to be. So we've talked about a lot on the front end, but then the back end, you're managing everything entirely remote. I know we only have a couple minutes here. So how do you do that?
How do I manage everything remote? That's a loaded question, but I would say systems and processes are like the biggest thing. So I would say the easiest things
How
to
many
do
times do you say systems and processes?
a million, but I'll make it more practical. Like the things that are like super easy to do remote would be like pricing strategy. Like so easy to look online. Obviously, there's a lot more analysis that goes into it, but like I can price a property anywhere in the world. So that's part of the management process. That's super simple. I would say a system or kind of documents that we have in place that makes it like a night and day difference. We have number one, questions that the owner typically answers when we onboard them. They answer basically every possible question that a guest would ask about their property that we wouldn't necessarily know, especially since we're not in person.
Where's the water heater?
Exactly.
Where's the breaker box? I'm
Yep.
assuming all that
Yep.
jazz.
All that jazz. All that jazz. And then if when issues happen, this is also part of my pitch when I'm pitching someone to let me coast their property. They're like, "Oh, Bailey, like, I wanted someone in person to do it. Like, I know you're remote, but I wanted someone who's gonna be, like, in person." I tell them, "Listen, I have properties where the oven's caught on fire. I've had the wells stop working. I've had roof leaks. I've had you name the issue, I've had it." I said, "Just to be honest with you, whether I'm your next door neighbor at the property or I'm 1,000 miles away, like, all I could literally do is stand there if I'm at the property, is take a video for you. But I'm not a handyman, I can't fix the oven, I can't fix a roof, but what we do is we find the right person to get the job done as quickly as humanly possible. I know you're saying this is what I say, I know it sounds great if I'm in person, but at the end of the day, like, I can't do every possible thing, and you don't want me to do every possible thing because if I go on vacation for a week, then the whole team crumbles. But if I have a team under me, then we have a bunch of different options no matter where I am.
Exactly, and that's the truth of the matter is you need people regardless of if you're there or not. You can be a jack of all trades, maybe handyman, plumber, electrician, but how often? And then at that time, if you're that locked in, let's say you're fixing something and you're getting the guest is messaging you and calling you,
Right.
and meanwhile you're doing electrical work, it's really not the best distribution of energy. Really, you should be focused on high level, the marketing, making sure it's getting booked, the pricing, making sure that you're competitive against everyone else in your market, the things that you can do digitally. And also, a lot of things you do digitally, you can also have others do digitally. I know we only have a
For
minute
sure.
left, but tell me about your team, who you have doing the day to day operations. I think you've taken an interesting approach that I haven't seen many others take in
Yeah.
the military moms
Yes, yes.
approach. But yeah, go into that. What do I mean by that?
I've got 3 team members. They're all military spouses. So, just an interesting niche, you could say. So, they're all actually, when we last talked, they were all US based. We have one person who's in the Philippines, but lived in the US for a while. So, she's not like your, I guess, typical VA. I wouldn't call her a VA, but we have, yeah, basically 3 people. 2 of them really handle like guest messaging, and then one of them is like the manager. So, basically takes me out of the day to day operations.
Do they communicate with the owners?
We've started to transition that.
That's the thing with co-hosting is, like, the one who actually talks to the owner. It's
Yeah,
hard to get that from someone like Bailey who did the onboarding to then say, "Oh, you're gonna actually your point of contact is gonna
yeah.
be someone else."
We have started to do that, and we have started to onboard them with the manager as well. That way they already know who she is. That way, like, the communication's, like, easier to do that.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So you're let me know how that goes because 'cause I'm curious on my end. Because that's the thing with arbitrage, it doesn't really matter. We'll have our team put in maintenance requests. Obviously, if there's something I gotta deal with, landlord will let me know. But with like co-hosting, they're your client. Like arbitrage is more of a partnership. You're
Right.
paying them literally monthly, fixed monthly rent. Whereas co-hosting in a way, like they're your client, which is different. Like the relationship is different, and it's a lot more client services, making sure that they're happy and stuff like that. But I digress. I know you had a hard stop at the
Yes.
top of the hour here. So Bailey, if anyone wants to reach out to you and learn from you, how can they find you?
Best place is Instagram. You can just look up my name. You'll see me on Instagram. So just look up Bailey Kramer. I think it's like _Bailey_Kramer.
The Bailey Kramer.
And most importantly, if you guys got value out of the show, go to
Yeah,
iTunes, leave a 5-star review. Jeremy's the man, and I appreciate you having me on, Jeremy.
that's what I needed. Thank you so much, Bailey. Yeah, guys, listening, I got to start saying that. But if you guys found this helpful or someone else wants to learn about short term rentals, share this to them. That's the only way this grows. I'm doing this purely for you guys. I'm having great folk like Bailey on for y'all. Hit it with that 5-star. I'd appreciate that. Send me a text, any feedback, thoughts. I always want to make this better. So this week, it's been great. Bailey, thank you so much for coming and stay tuned for the next one.
Thanks, Jeremy. Peace.